It was a quiet summer Sunday in Soham, a peaceful town in the English countryside, when two 10-year-old best friends became the protagonists of what would become one of the country's most tragic stories. Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman were enjoying their summer vacation at a barbecue at the Wells family home. Jessica had arrived in the morning, bringing a special present for Holly, a necklace with the letter H that she had bought during her vacation in Spain. During the afternoon, in a typical gesture of best friends, the girls decided to wear identical Manchester United shirts. Holly's mother, delighted with the scene, captured the moment with a photograph at 5:04 p.m., an image that would later become painfully significant. Around 6:10 p.m., the girls left to buy sweets. When Holly's mother went to look for them to say goodbye to the guests at 8:10 p.m., she couldn't find them. At first, there wasn't much concern. It was common for children to play in the streets of Soham during summer. However, when the clock struck 8:30 p.m., Holly's established curfew, and there was no sign of the girls, worry began to consume the parents. Attempts to call Jessica's mobile phone were futile. The device was turned off. The initial search of the surroundings yielded no results, and at 9:45 p.m., the police were called. What no one knew at that moment was that innocent trip to buy sweets would be the last time the two friends would be seen alive. Watch until the end to understand every detail of this story, and if you're not yet subscribed, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any true crime videos. What began as a night of apprehension in Soham quickly transformed into one of the largest search operations ever conducted in British history. The town, known for its tranquility and considered a safe place for children, suddenly found itself at the epicenter of an unprecedented mobilization. In the first hours after the alarm was raised, more than 400 police officers were assigned to work full-time on the case. The scale of the operation was even more impressive considering that Soham was under the jurisdiction of one of the country's smallest police forces. Officers conducted meticulous searches, examining every street, house, and plot of land in the region, following a rigorous investigation protocol. The police established their command center at St. Andrew's Primary School, where Holly and Jessica studied, a decision that would later prove problematic. Specialized teams were brought in from various parts of the country, including Detective Chief Inspector Martin Underhill, who had worked on the Sarah Payne kidnapping case and was known for his expertise in investigating missing children cases. The Soham community, deeply impacted by the disappearance of the two girls beloved by all, responded with an extraordinary demonstration of solidarity. Hundreds of volunteers joined the official efforts, many sacrificing their work and personal commitments to participate in the searches. Residents tirelessly searched every corner of the town, from residential areas to open fields and more remote regions. The Wells and Chapman families received massive support from the community. Neighbors took turns providing meals, emotional support, and any necessary help while the parents lived through the anguish of waiting for news. National and international media quickly converged on Soham, transforming the case into an editorial priority. Journalists from various media outlets set up camp in the town, transmitting constant updates about the searches. The smiling faces of Holly and Jessica, wearing their Manchester United shirts, became iconic images that touched the hearts of millions of people. The case gained even more visibility when celebrities became involved in public appeals. Player David Beckham, then at the height of his career at Manchester United, made an emotional appeal asking for information about the girls' whereabouts. His participation helped keep the case in the spotlight and encouraged more people to get involved in the searches. A significant breakthrough occurred when authorities gained access to security camera footage from the area. The recordings showed Holly and Jessica walking near the local sports center, wearing the now famous Manchester United shirts. These would be the last images of the girls alive, captured approximately 45 seconds before their disappearance. 9 different witnesses reported seeing the girls in that area, including Ian Huntley, the school caretaker, who would later become a central figure in the case. He claimed to have briefly spoken with the girls, who had allegedly asked about his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, a teaching assistant at the school. The scale of the operation grew even larger with the involvement of the Royal Air Force, RAF. Helicopters equipped with thermal cameras flew over the region, searching for any sign of the girls. Cutting-edge technology was combined with traditional search methods, including teams with sniffer dogs and divers examining local bodies of water. A substantial reward was offered for information leading to the girls' whereabouts, reaching £1 million, an unprecedented amount for the time. The sum reflected the authorities' determination to solve the case and the deep public emotion that the disappearance had caused. The investigation headquarters, established at St. Andrew's School, transformed into a 24-hour information processing center. Teams worked in shifts, analyzing more than 15,000 calls from the public and processing hundreds of possible leads. Police conducted thorough checks on registered sex offenders in the region and investigated possible connections to similar cases in other areas. However, this choice of location for the operations center, the very school where the girls studied, would later prove to be a questionable tactical decision. The place that should have been the central point of the investigation would ironically end up being crucially connected to the very crime they were trying to solve. While the Soham community united in the search for Holly and Jessica, one particular character began to stand out in a disturbing way. Ian Huntley, the caretaker at St. Andrew's School where the girls studied, gradually attracted investigators' attention through a pattern of behavior that oscillated between suspicious and bizarre. At a time when most Soham residents expressed their grief in silence, Huntley demonstrated an almost compulsive need to be in the spotlight. He constantly appeared before cameras, giving voluntary interviews to various media outlets. In his appearances, he detailed his supposed last encounter with the girls, describing how they had passed in front of his house, and asked about his girlfriend, Maxine Carr. Sky News journalist Jeremy Thompson, who interviewed Huntley, would later recall something disturbing about his behavior. There was something a bit strange about him. He didn't seem like a villain as such. I mean, there are very few people who have murderer written on their forehead, but there was something uncomfortable about his presence. During initial interrogations, Huntley showed a peculiar interest in forensic aspects of the case. In a particularly revealing moment, he asked investigators a single question: how long does DNA remain on objects? An inquiry that immediately raised red flags among experienced police officers. His physical appearance also began to raise suspicions. Huntley had visible scratches on his face, which he attributed to an incident with his dog. The explanation, seemingly casual, would later be questioned by investigators as part of a larger pattern of inconsistencies. When investigators visited Huntley's residence, located on school grounds, they found a scene that seemed taken from a criminal behavior manual. The house was meticulously clean, with a strong smell of disinfectant permeating all rooms. It was as if someone had tried to obsessively eliminate any trace or evidence. The excessive cleaning contrasted with the normal state of the house, known to other school staff. It was as if the environment had undergone a sudden and complete transformation, precisely in the days following the girls' disappearance. The case took on a new dimension with the involvement of Maxine Carr, Huntley's girlfriend and teaching assistant at the same school. Carr initially provided a solid alibi for Huntley, claiming she was with him throughout the Sunday of the disappearance. Her testimony seemed to give credibility to Huntley's version of events. However, in a television interview, Carr made a crucial slip. She consistently referred to the girls in the past tense, as if she already knew their fate at a time when everyone still maintained hopes of finding them alive. A TV producer noticed this linguistic peculiarity, which would later prove to be a significant clue. As the investigation progressed, inconsistencies in Huntley's story began to accumulate. His descriptions of the encounter with the girls varied subtly each time he told the story. He demonstrated unusual knowledge about case details that hadn't been publicly disclosed. His behavior alternated between periods of apparent excessive concern and moments of clinical detachment from events. The turning point came when investigators discovered that Maxine Carr was actually in her hometown, Grimsby, on the day of the disappearance. Her alibi for Huntley was a complete fabrication. When confronted, Carr initially maintained her story but eventually admitted to lying to protect Huntley, claiming she feared he would be unfairly accused due to his past. The collapse of Huntley's alibi, combined with his erratic behavior and the physical evidence beginning to emerge, transformed the helpful caretaker who appeared on television into the main suspect in one of the most shocking cases in British criminal history. The mask of concern and cooperation that he had so carefully constructed began to disintegrate, revealing a much darker truth behind it. 13 days of anguish and uncertainty came to a tragic end on August 17, 2002. What began with a call from Keith Pryor, a 48-year-old man walking his dog, culminated in the discovery that all of England feared but hoped wouldn't happen. Days before, Pryor had noticed a peculiar and disturbing odor in a remote area, about 16 kilometers from Soham. That August Saturday, he decided to investigate the source of the smell with two friends. Walking through a densely wooded area, approximately 550 meters from the main road, they encountered a scene they would never forget. The bodies of two girls, laid side by side in an irrigation ditch approximately 1.5 meters deep. The high temperatures of the English summer and an apparent attempt to carbonize the bodies had significantly accelerated the decomposition process. Forensic pathologists faced a race against time to preserve crucial evidence. Despite adverse conditions, they managed to recover personal items that confirmed the victims' identities, including the necklace with the letter H that Jessica had given to Holly on that fateful Sunday morning. While the nation processed the shock of the discovery, the investigation entered its most intense phase. A series of evidence began to form an incriminating web around Ian Huntley. In a new thorough search of St. Andrew's School, investigators made a disturbing discovery in the storage room. Inside a barrel, hidden in garbage bags, were the carbonized remains of two Manchester United shirts, the same ones Holly and Jessica were wearing on the day of their disappearance. The attempt to destroy evidence had been meticulous, but not complete. Laboratory analysis revealed a series of irrefutable connections. Microscopic fibers found on the girls' shirts showed an exact match with fibers from Huntley's coat and boots. DNA samples extracted from the garbage bags containing the burned clothes matched Huntley's genetic profile. Chemical analysis of debris found in Huntley's car trunk showed identical composition to the soil where the bodies were found. A seemingly insignificant detail provided another crucial piece of the puzzle. Huntley had changed all 4 tires on his car shortly after the girl's disappearance. Auto shop employees reported that he offered a bribe to register a different license plate in the service book. The original tires, perfectly usable, had been replaced without apparent need, a desperate attempt to eliminate evidence of the journey to where the bodies were abandoned. Technical expertise was crucial in transforming suspicions into concrete evidence. The post-mortem analysis, although hampered by the body's conditions, managed to establish that at least one of the girls had suffered sexual violence, although it wasn't possible to determine whether before or after death. The probable cause of death was identified as asphyxiation. The discovery of the bodies transformed the atmosphere in Soham. The hope that had moved hundreds of volunteers in the searches gave way to a deep sense of collective mourning. The town, which had already lost its innocence with the disappearance, now faced the harsh reality that evil had emerged from within its own community. With the accumulation of forensic evidence, the police now had a solid case against Huntley. The caretaker, who weeks before voluntarily appeared on television cameras offering information about the girls, now found himself at the center of a web of scientific evidence that he couldn't explain. The discovery of the bodies and subsequent evidence not only provided the necessary proof for prosecution, but also exposed the extent of planning and attempt to conceal the crime. What emerged was not an impulsive act, but a meticulously executed crime and a calculated attempt to escape justice. As the investigation into Holly and Jessica's disappearance progressed, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Behind the facade of Soham's helpful caretaker, Ian Huntley hid a dark history of violence and predatory behavior that extended over years, revealing a much more complex and dangerous personality than appeared. Investigations revealed 9 previous accusations of improper behavior with minors. The pattern was consistent. Huntley showed particular interest in girls between 10 and 15 years old, approaching them through friendships and manipulation. None of these accusations resulted in conviction, allowing him to continue his predatory behavior without legal impediments. His personal relationships were invariably marked by violence. In 1994, Huntley met Claire, whom he married after just a few weeks of dating. The marriage quickly turned into a nightmare, with Claire reporting that she lived in constant fear for her life due to her husband's aggressive behavior. Even after separation, Huntley refused to sign divorce papers, maintaining obsessive control over his ex-wife. Still legally married to Claire, Huntley began a relationship with a 15-year-old teenager named Emma, taking her to live in his mother's house. When social services investigated the situation, Huntley instructed Emma to lie, saying she was just temporarily staying. Emma became pregnant, but lost the baby after a period of intense psychological abuse. She managed to escape, but would carry the emotional scars forever. The pattern continued with Kate, who also became pregnant by Huntley. Unlike Emma, Kate managed to escape before losing the baby and raised her daughter Samantha alone, away from her aggressor's clutches. His propensity for violence manifested even against members of his own family. His younger brother, Wayne, was one of his first victims. In a particularly disturbing incident, Wayne spent his 8th birthday hospitalized after Huntley, then 9 years old, attacked him with a brick until he lost consciousness. To escape the consequences of his actions, Huntley developed a pattern of frequent town changes whenever suspicions began to arise. This nomadic behavior was a deliberate tactic to prevent his past from catching up with him. To facilitate his escapes and fresh starts, he frequently used false names. In Soham, for example, he even introduced himself as Ian Nixon for a period. Huntley's last relationship before the Soham crimes was with Maxine Carr. Following his usual pattern, he involved her in an intense and controlling relationship, using manipulation techniques such as love bombing, bombarding her with excessive attention and gifts to create emotional dependency. Huntley convinced Carr to move with him to Soham, 200 kilometers from her hometown, effectively isolating her from her family and social support network. The case exposed serious flaws in the British protection system, from the lack of a national database allowing police forces to share information about suspects, to inadequate background checks for people working with children. The tendency of some victims to withdraw complaints due to fear or manipulation, combined with authorities' inability to recognize predatory behavior patterns across different jurisdictions, created an environment where Huntley could continue making victims. Huntley's past was a catalog of ignored warning signs, a series of missed opportunities to prevent him from making more victims. Each unresolved incident, each inadequately investigated accusation, each town change without follow-up, contributed to creating the conditions that allowed him to eventually commit his most heinous crimes and so on. In November 2003, the Old Bailey, London's famous Central Criminal Court, became the stage for one of the most anticipated trials in British criminal history. Ian Huntley, the man who had repeatedly appeared on television showing concern about Holly and Jessica's disappearance, now sat in the dock, facing charges for the murder of both girls. During the trial, Huntley presented a version of events that left the court perplexed. According to his account, Holly had entered his house with a nosebleed, asking for help. In the bathroom, Huntley claimed to have accidentally slipped, knocking Holly into the full bathtub, where she allegedly drowned. As for Jessica, he claimed that the girl began to scream upon witnessing the incident, and in an attempt to silence her, he accidentally suffocated her. Prosecutors methodically dismantled this unlikely narrative. They argued that Huntley's version was nothing more than a desperate lie from a man cornered by evidence. The prosecution suggested that the events in Huntley's house had sexual motivation, and when something went out of control, he decided that both girls needed to die to keep his secret. Huntley's behavior during the trial oscillated between moments of apparent dissociation and calculated attempts to manipulate the court. He even claimed memory loss due to the trauma of having accidentally caused the deaths, a claim that psychiatric experts categorically rejected. Maxine Carr also faced her moment before justice. In one of the most dramatic moments of the trial, she pointed to Huntley and declared, "I will not be guilty for what that thing in that box did to me." Her defense argued that she had lied to protect Huntley because she genuinely believed in his innocence, a claim that the jury only partially considered. In December 2003, after intense deliberations, the jury reached its verdict. With a majority of 11-1, Ian Huntley was found guilty of double first-degree murder. The judge handed down a sentence that reflected the gravity of the crimes, 2 life sentences. By a twist of fate, the law establishing life imprisonment without possibility of parole had been approved only 1 day after his conviction. Thus, Huntley received the possibility of applying for parole after serving a minimum of 40 years, in 2042, when he will be 68 years old. As for Maxine Carr, her sentence was considerably lighter. Convicted of obstruction of justice, she was sentenced to 3.5 years, but served only 6 months before being released. She received a new identity and, according to reports, built a new life away from the spotlight that the case attracted. In prison, Huntley quickly discovered that even among criminals there are moral codes. He suffered various attacks, including one with boiling water in an attempt to cut his throat. His life behind bars became a reflection of the horror he had inflicted, isolated, feared, and despised even by other criminals. The families of Holly and Jessica expressed their own sentence for Huntley. They declared that they hoped their next encounter with him would be like their last with their daughters, in a coffin. For them, no judicial sentence could truly do justice to the magnitude of their loss. And so we come to the end of this tragic story that forever changed security procedures in British schools. If you like this narrative, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It's very important to us. We'll see you in the next video with another case that marked criminal history. Best wishes.